Yeah, we could also go into a lot of themes in anime when it comes to gender roles and things because they're all over the place in anime. I mean, you
Oh,
could
but
go in.
there's a couple of videos that touch on this on the Average Intelligence podcast YouTube channel, and there's this idea, in which it's gotten a lot better since, because I have this book right here, and I highly recommend it. This is not the most recent version, but if you're into anime or storytelling in general, I highly recommend. There's an entire chapter in this book. Well, actually, there's multiple chapters that would be pertinent, but there's one. There's a chapter about gender roles in anime and manga, and then there's one about the LGBTQ community. Well, not Q, but the LGBT. No, just
Which anime has been touching into that way before we ever really.
well. But here's the thing. So, upon a surface level glance, it looks as though if your only exposure to the culture is anime and you're not in the know, you might assume that they're very LGBT friendly. But if you really look at how they tell those stories, it's not quite as now. Granted, it's gotten better since this was written, but it wasn't that long ago, because it makes the point. If you look at a lot of those stories, they're either in a niche market like the yaoi and yuri genres, where there's a different goal in mind with those stories. Those kind of don't count because they're a niche audience. But if you look at like the big main anime series, particularly of the 80s and 90s, whenever you had characters that were outside of the norm, shall we say, and this goes for gender roles too, because they point to the series Utena. I can't remember. The main character on that is a woman who is ostensibly, within the context of the series, she behaves like a man. She does not get a happy ending. In fact, most of the series is her bad things happening to her. And then she doesn't even get the happy ending. And then it points to a lot of gay characters that are either played for laughs. This goes into cross-dressing too, but it's more cross-dressing instead of transgender. But I mean, they kind of touch on that too. These characters are often played for laughs, so they're either the butt of the joke, if they're not outright villains, or even if they're in line with the good guys, they don't get their happy ending. Sometimes they die. Sometimes they end up in a miserable position. And this is very, very subtly telling the Japanese audience that that's not the way to go. Because and anime storytelling is extremely sophisticated. Like, it's extremely sophisticated. I highly recommend this book, because it goes into and it shows a lot of the common symbolism and story threads. Because a lot of anime series, and we don't know this because we grew up in the West, a lot of these series are basically retellings of old, very old stories. Very, very old stories. And like, if you grow up in Japan, you get it.
Yep.
And they'll make subtle references to stuff from the Kojiki that, like, unless you're, as a Westerner, unless you're told, you wouldn't get. Like, there's a set of characters in my favorite arc of Yu Yu Hakusho, the Dark Tournament arc. One of the teams is comprised of the story of the Peach Boy, Momotaro, but they're all inversions of those characters. And it's like this little like nudge and a wink where a Japanese audience would get it, but as a Westerner, I had no idea. And then I read this book and I was like, oh, that's so funny.
Oh, okay.
But I just didn't know. And then like there's one character that transforms a few times into various animals, and like, to me as a Westerner not in the know, they just seem like really random animals, particularly the peacock transformation. But there's the story of Urishima, and one of the characters is named Yura Urishima, which literally means reverse Urishima. And it's just it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. So yeah, book recommendation, highly recommend. There's been a couple of updates since this one. I think this is the one that was published in like 2004.
I'm definitely gonna have to read that because I absolutely love reading into the deeper themes in pretty much anything, but like anime and stuff really it really fascinates me. Not just anime, but anything from other cultures, where you can go deeper in and find, meanings that you didn't realize.